Hey there, crafty friends, it's Tina of Scrappin Rabbit here. Thank you so much for stopping by my channel today. In this video we're going to make a Halloween card, and we're going to start off using some products by Newton's Nook Designs, a stencil as well as this adorable little stamp. To get started, we're going to go ahead and get that stencil ready to go, and a different way that you can use your stencil is by using your embossing powder. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tape the cardstock, which is Bristol smooth cardstock, to the inside, to the back side of your stencil. I'm going to use some painter's tape because that is the tape that I like to use. It doesn't rip my paper. I'm going to go ahead and tape that stencil down onto my little platform there. And I'm going to use this Versamark ink just like I would if I was embossing a sentiment. But instead I'm going to work it into all the little grooves of that spider web because I'm going to use some embossing powder for this background. Once I get some good coverage, I'm going to go ahead and lift off that stencil carefully, and I don't want to get my fingers in there. And I'm going to get out some embossing powder. It's holographic embossing powder from my stash, and it is one that I've had for quite some time. It was made by Stampin' Up. I'm not sure if it's still available, but it is one of my most favorite embossing powders. I'm going to make sure I get good coverage on there, and you can already see how sparkly that is. I'm going to shake off the excess, and after heating my heat tool for a few seconds, when it's nice and hot, I'm going to go ahead and melt that powder. There is no color to this powder, and so the white from the cardstock is going to show from behind the glitter, but then you have that holographic glitter just melted on there, and it just looks beautiful. Using my mini distress inks, I'm going to start off with the lightest color, going from the center to the outer side. And I usually work my way in from the outside to the center, but this time I'm going to start out with my lightest color because I just want to make sure that that light color does not get covered. So once I have my light color centered in there, I'm going to rub in with my next color, which is the Wilted Violet. This embossing powder has a little bit of texture to it because of all the glitter, so there's a little bit of friction when I am rubbing into the paper, so it doesn't feel as smooth as if I was rubbing directly on the paper itself. Working my way around, I'm going to grab the Dusty Concord, which is my darkest shade of purple, and I'm going to work it to almost the very end of the paper. Once I get those three purples in there and I'm rubbing them around real good, I'm going to try to blend out the lines, bringing back that Wilted Violet to get a smoother blend, and then blend that out again with the shaded Lilac. I also have the Black Soot, which is my darkest color, and I'm going to use that to frame the panel. The Black Soot does take a few layers to get nice and dark, so I'm just starting from the edges and working my way in, and I'm going to go around again to add another layer of color. The more times you go around, you see that color start to deepen, and it really starts to look wonderful, especially for a nice spooky panel, which is what I'm going for. So using the Dusty Concord, I'm going to go ahead and blend out some of that Black Soot and work it through to remove some of those harsh lines. It's nice to have a piece of scratch paper so that you can blend out your foam, especially if you're using some black, and then that way that helps from getting the black onto your ink. I'm just going to work my way back around towards the center again with that shaded Lilac, keeping that my lightest color. And already you could see that color starting to pop. So now I'm going to go back in, add another layer of color. And it takes a little bit of time, but it is so worth it. The results are always just amazing. Framing it again with that dark soot. And that Post-it really helps me to keep my fingers from getting so inky, as well as keep the oils from my finger from getting on my paper. So blending out those lines again using the Dusty Concord, and then the Wilted Violet, and then the Shaded Lilac. You really start to see that background panel coming to life. Now I'm going to go ahead and take this cloth and wipe over the embossed area to pick up some of the ink that might have settled on there, and that's going to really help my embossed area to really shine. So I hope you could see all that sparkle. So now I'm going to go ahead and stamp my image, this adorable little pug peeking out of the jack-o'-lantern. Now I'm going to go ahead and use some VersaFine black ink because I'm going to emboss this image as well. I like to give it a double stamp, and using a stamp tool is very helpful for that. And that way I can pick up lots of embossing powder with that ink, and so the ink gets covered completely because you don't want any of that ink to be exposed when you're coloring with Copics. After heating my heat tool up, I'm going to go ahead and melt that powder down, and there I have my nice embossed images. So I like to stamp several images at a time for future use, and I'm just going to go ahead and use some double-sided tape to tape that onto this little square for easier turning while I'm coloring my image up. So I'm going to start off with the pumpkin, and this is the E99, and that is a nice dark color to kind of get in where the darker, more shadowed layers will be. And then I'll go ahead and blend that out with the E97. And those two colors really work well together. Bringing in some of the bright orange, I have the YR09, and I'm just going to kind of sketch in where the grooves on that pumpkin will be, and I'll blend that out with the YR04. And that's going to be the main color for my pumpkin. And then you can see that the color is starting to come together, and by adding another layer of the darkness there towards the top and the bottom, it really does help to give your pumpkin some dimension. So I'm adding another layer of the E99 and the E97, and then just blending it out towards the center and the lightest areas of the pumpkin, with each layer bringing the color more to the center, adding some more of that darker orange, and then blending it out again with the YR04. And that's going to be the main color, so I'm going to go ahead and start to fill that in towards the center. And then I do have the YR14 to help fill in some of that white space. And then bringing in some yellow with the YR21, I'll fill that in as well. The great thing about the Copics is that you can add layer upon layer with the color and then bring in more richness and more contrast. And now I'm just adding another layer of the YR04, filling in some of the white areas that I've missed around, and drawing and blending out some of that color of the darker colors in towards the center. Going in with the E99 again, just to deepen those darker areas, to kind of give the illusion that the pumpkin is sticking out more in the center, giving that illusion of dimension, and then blending that out again with the E97. Now I'm going to go ahead and work on the eyes using the T9 to outline the eyes, the nose, as well as the points in the mouth. To blend that out, I'll go ahead and use the T7 and just go over that and bring the color again outwards. And then blend that out with the T5, continuing to go, bringing that color out, leaving the white space in the center, and finally blend that out using my lightest color, the T3. Once I have that first layer down, I'm going to go ahead and repeat the same exact process, going in with the T9 to outline, blend that out again with the T7, and some of the spaces are quite small, so it doesn't take a lot of color. Drawing that color out again with the T5, And finally, blending that all out with the lightest color, the T3. And again, that adds a little dimension to the eyes and the nose and the mouth. Now it's time to color the top of the pumpkin. I should have done that while I was doing the bottom, but sometimes when I'm coloring, it's hard for me to see all the places that I need to color at the same time. Basically using the same exact colors and drawing them out towards the bottom to give you that nice color variation, and bringing in some of that light color as well. And then that cut part of the pumpkin is going to be the lightest, so I'm going to just kind of sketch in a little of the YR14 and then blend that out with the yellow color, and then bring in some of the E41, which is like a very light beige, and blend that out a little bit. Once I have the top of the pumpkin done, I'm going to go ahead and work on the inside there with just the darkest colors. Now it's time to start coloring up the stem, and so I'm going to use different shades of brown for that. The E25, blending it out with the E23, and then again the E21 as the lightest. And just to buff it out a little bit, I'll bring in a E41 just to soften that little line. Working on the ears, I'm going to bring in my second to darkest color, which is the E44, and I'm going to flick it up at the tips of his ears as well as his adorable little muzzle. And I'll go ahead and I'll blend the E44 out with the E43 and flick again towards the top of the ears, and then bringing the color in from the out of the muzzle towards the center of the muzzle. The next color is the E42, again flicking that up and bringing the color towards the center, going from dark to light. And to get the contrast going, I'm going to bring in the darkest color, the E47, and go over the tips of his ears as well as the outer side of his muzzle. Blending that out again with the E44 as well as the E42, and then just kind of bring that color in towards the top of the ear and towards the center of his little muzzle. This is one of my favorite blends with the E40s, especially when it comes to fur, and it's the perfect colors I think for a little pug breed. Blending that out again, the E42, and then soften that out with the E41. Now to do his little face, I'm going to just bring in that deepest color over the little creases in his little forehead, around his eyes, and right above his nose. Very thin strip of that dark color, and then I'll blend that out going from the darkest to the lightest, the E44. I'll soften those lines out, and then the E43, and then once I have that down, then I'll go ahead and blend that out again with the E42. And that kind of keeps the color right there in the center of his face, and then it gives me the room to blend all of that out into a lighter shade so that his face looks like it is two-tone. The E41, I'm just going to draw some of that color outwards towards the side of his face, and then blend it out with my lightest color, the E40. And already you're starting to see a lot of contrast, which looks really nice. To frame his face, I am going to bring a little bit of color around the edges, and I'm going to use the E43 for that to give a little shadow under his ears and then between his little toes. And then I'll bring that E42 to blend that out a little bit. and to blend out his little toes. The E41 and the E40. And there's his little feet. Do one more layer there for his little toes, just to add a little bit of dimension. Give a little bit more of the darkness there to add some of that contrast. And I think he's turning out so super cute. Now that I'm done with his little feet, I'm going to move on to his nose. I'm going to use the same blacks that I used in the eyes and the nose and the mouth of the jack-o'-lantern, doing the same transition of T9 to T7 to T5 and to T3. So I'm keeping one side of his nose a little bit lighter. And just to add a little more dimension to his eyes, I'm just going to bring in a C0 and a C00 to add a little bit of shading on the outer edge. For the banner, for the sentiment strip, I'm going to use the sentiment from this Lawn Fawn Halloween stamps, and I'm going to use the Happy Halloween. I have that little banner from the My Favorite Things Blueprints. I think it's the Blueprints 27. I haven't seen it for sale in a while, so I'm not sure if it's discontinued, but it's a nice little banner, and you can kind of just cut the length that you want. And so I'm stamping and embossing this sentiment in white embossing powder so that it pops on that black strip, and that's going to tie in with the spooky Halloween colors that I have for the background panel. Once I have the embossing powder on there, I'll heat my tool and I'll go ahead and melt that down. I'm going to put my panel onto my A2 size card base, and using the My Favorite Things Grassy Hills die, I cut out a couple strips of grass in black so it looks like it's night. And I'm going to glue that front panel onto the front of my card base. And then once I have that on there evenly, I'm going to go ahead and glue on the grass. And I'm going to use the wet glue that I have there. I like the wet glue because it gives you a little bit of time to move it around to get it as centered and straight as possible. Add my little second layer of grass on there, and then put my little pugkin on there. I'll glue him directly to my card base, right in between those two layers of grass. And then I have that little dangling spider there. That's from a My Creative Time Halloween die set. I'm not sure if that's available anymore. I'm going to pop up my sentiment using some double-sided foam adhesive, and then add the little dangling spider to the back side of there and get that attached to my card. And there it is. That is the completed card with that sparkly stencil background. Thanks again, everybody, for stopping by. I really do appreciate your thumbs up and your comments. Here are a couple more videos that you may be interested in. I hope that you enjoyed this process of making this Halloween card using these Newton's Nook Design products. And until next time, everybody, I hope you have a wonderful day. Thanks again. Happy crafting. Bye for now.